Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Ramadan Journey. We've had quite an eventful journey so far. I don't expect to know how many of you are reacting to the programs that you've heard so far. But for me, it's not only been a learning experience, but I'm also reminded of many things that I have read in the past in the tafsir. And I'm one of those people who've had to read the tafsir 3 or 4 times in order to edit it properly. And so even I, who read the tafsir, I'm learning quite a few things in this journey that we've had with Imam al-Asi. And so it's wonderful to have you on this program. Welcome once again.
Thank you.
What we're going to talk about in this particular program is we're going to go into the 3rd ayah of the cluster of ayat for Ramadan. And this ayah begins with Shahru Ramadan alladhi unzila fihi al-Qur'an. And we're going to talk about the first portion of this ayah. We're going to talk about how the Qur'an was revealed during the month of Ramadan. And then we're going to try to establish a connection between this ayah and the first ayah, the introductory ayah for this section. And so we'd like to get started by asking, what exactly does it mean that the Qur'an was sent down during the month of Ramadan? We know that the Qur'an was revealed over 23 years. All of it was not revealed in Ramadan. So what exactly does the wording of this ayah express to us today who are coming 1430 years after the revelation of the Qur'an?
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين رحمة الله للعالمين وعلى آله وصحبه الميامين. The ayah that you were referring to begins like this: شهر رمضان الذي أنزل فيه القرآن هدى للناس وبينات من الهدى والفرقان. The English wording of these meanings goes something like this: the month of Ramadan is the month in which the Qur'an has been made accessible in the form of guidance to people, hudan linnas, wa bayyinatin min al-huda wal-furqan, and as proof of that guidance and as a criterion. Let us backtrack and try to take this in a calculated measure. The first 2 words, Shahru Ramadan, the month of Ramadan. Now what does Ramadan mean? Ramadan is a word related to another word in the Arabic language, which is Ramda. And Ramda is in reference to the surface of the earth, such as stones and rocks and sand and this, that become so hot that they are almost ambers. So the word Ramadan, within its meaning, is the very word. Within its meaning is heat. And that is in the very undeveloped, almost elementary understanding of the word. When it is said, when the lunar months of the calendar, from the beginning with the month of Al-Muharram, ending with the month of Dhul Hijjah, these months, when they were named, when they were first identified, they were identified with the seasons, with temperatures, or with climates. So when the month of Ramadan was called, because these months, as you know, unlike the solar calendar, they rotate, they go around the full cycle of the year. So Ramadan in 15 years, Ramadan in this year happens to be in the southern hemisphere wintertime, in the northern hemisphere summertime. In 15 years from now, or so, 16 or so, 17 years, they're going to exchange positions. So Ramadan is here in the southern hemisphere is going to be in summer. In the northern hemisphere, it's going to be in the wintertime, the cold climate time.
Yeah, it's not keyed to the seasons, basically.
Yeah, it's not a fixed portion of the year like the solar months.
That's
not
right.
like July or January, etc. No, it's different. But the point that we're trying to here connect language with reality. When this month was identified, when they named the month, it happened to fall into a heated time of the year, summertime, when there's a lot of heat and you have the surface of the earth feeling like it is sparks or like amber. But to make a transition from that elementary meaning to the more developed sciences that we have today, you could easily relate Ramadan to calories. Because a calorie is also the burning of a certain amount of heat in the human body. So how appropriate do we have it when Ramadan relates to the heat in the atmosphere as well as the heat in the human body? And what is meant by fasting is the burning of calories. When a person fasts and they are in the routine of their daily work, going here and coming there and lifting stuff and all of this, you find the body, in addition to its fasting, there is its movement, and the combination of the two begin to burn the calories in the body. So, Shahru Ramadan, if we can zero in on this meaning, Shahru Ramadan, this month of calorie burning, of a climate that is on the hot side. Shahru Ramadan, alladhi unzila fihi al-Qur'an.
We're going to come back to that in just a minute. We have to take a word here from our sponsors. Please stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Welcome Ramadan. Welcome Ramadan.
And welcome back. We're talking about the meaning of the word Ramadan and how it applies to heat and the burning of energy in the body during fasting, and how the linguistic meaning of the word applies to the practical behavior of people who are fasting in Ramadan. And so now we're going to continue on to the next portion of the ayah, and we're going to try to understand what exactly it means that the Quran is more accessible during the month of Ramadan.
Yes, so the ayah goes on to say, after we began with the two words, Shahru Ramadan, that was followed by, Alladhi unzila fihi al-Qur'an, meaning the month of Ramadan is the month in which the Qur'an is made more accessible to human understanding. We know that because here we run into mistranslations, because they say the month of Ramadan is the month in which the Qur'an came down. And then because we all know that the Qur'an didn't come down all at once, it was spread over a period of 23 years. Mm-hmm. And obviously all of those 23 years are not Shahr Ramadan.
Right.
So the interpretation with some of these people who explain the ayah like this say that the Quran came down from al-Lawh al-Mahfuz or from Allah's laduniya, from Allah's presence to al-Lawh al-Mahfuz, and then from there to human knowledge or to this world. So they try to explain that in that way. I take another understanding of this ayah in which unzila means, it literally means to bring down. But the literal understanding here places a burden on the processing of the free flow of the ayah. So what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us, every month of Ramadan, not a particular month or a particular time in the Prophet's lifetime, every month of Ramadan, Shahru Ramadan, the month of Ramadan, whether it's in those years, 1400 years or so ago, or in our time, or in the future, is the time in which the Quran becomes intimately accessible to the understanding of people. شهر رمضان الذي أنزل فيه القرآن.
I guess just like rain comes down and it gives the ground more access to water, in sort of a similar, type of sense.
Yeah, you can say that.
Yeah.
So شهر رمضان الذي أنزل فيه القرآن. When we think about the exercise of fasting that we are observing during this month of Ramadan, remember in a previous program I made reference to the earlier fuqaha saying that the human body has vapors in it.
Yeah, you're talking about toxicity.
Yeah, and these vapors, I'm still using the language of the classical ulama of those times. These vapors, they intrude the thinking process. A person begins to have a foggy memory, or he's not clear in his thoughts. Well, the month of fasting, what it does, going back to that early literature, is it begins to
cleanse
and eliminate those vapors, and the mind begins to clear out.
And so that's what opens it up to the Quran.
Yeah. So, but here we are. This doesn't mean, in an exhaustive sense, that people who don't fast can't understand the Quran or cannot access the meaning of the Quran. Certainly, any rational person can do that. But the Quran is meant to address more than just the human mind. It's also there to touch base with human nature, to stir the spirit, and to move the soul. And when we all fast, that is the effect of the Quran on our psychology, on our mentality, and on our physiology. They all begin to respond to the message of the Quran, and thus our human nature, our human interaction with the Quran is more so in Ramadan, under the conditions of fasting, observing the fast as we are supposed to, than it would be in other months of the year when we are eating and we are more or less, to use a pedestrian phrase, enjoying ourselves. So, شهر رمضان الذي أنزل فيه القرآن هدى للناس. The Quran, with this accessibility, becomes guidance for people. Now, this all began with الذين آمنوا. We began the discourse by saying يا أيها الذين آمنوا كتب عليكم الصيام. But here, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is tracing the effects of our fast, it says, your observance of the fast becomes guidance for people, not for الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا, not for scripture, just generic people in all of the world.
Yeah, if you can hold that thought for just a second, this needs a lot more explanation, and we're going to cover that portion of it in the next segment. Please hold on for a message from our sponsors. We'll be right back.
Welcome Ramadan. Welcome Ramadan.
And welcome back. We were talking about, just getting into, talking about what starts off as an activity of committed Muslims ends up as guidance for mankind. I'm going to preface my next question with some more statistics. And we know that as far as the Prophet ﷺ was concerned and the Muslims that were around him, they fasted only 9 Ramadans. And they had an immeasurable impact on humanity. And today we Muslims, billions of us, we're fasting every year, and we've been fasting for centuries. And it seems like the more we fast, the more the world becomes oppressive and unjust and tyrannical. The exact opposite of what was happening at the time of the Prophet. And at the time of the Prophet, by the end of his mission, we could say, if we were sort of liberal in our estimates, maybe 50,000 Muslims were fasting. And today, again, it's just the opposite. Let me read some statistics to you that an analysis of long-term trends shows the income distance between the richest and the poorest countries. In 1820, the rich countries were making 3 times what a poor country would be making. In 1913, that went up to 11 times. In 1950, it became 35 times. In 1973, 44 times. In 1992, the rich countries were making 72 times as much as the poor countries. And in 2010, it was 100 times more than the poor countries. And so more than 80% of the world's population lives in countries where income differentials are widening. And so what do you think is the difference today between the Muslims fasting today and the Muslims fasting at the time of the Prophet? Far fewer in number, yet the impact on humanity was just the opposite.
Yeah, it goes back to what we were saying previously, that when the Muslims initially began exercising the discipline of Ramadan, carrying the meanings of Ramadan, they knew they were out there to slaughter hunger and poverty. That's what Ramadan means, to go out there and virtually eliminate poverty and hunger from society. That was a message that they were carrying with them. They weren't just satisfied, hey look, this is Ramadan, I'm going to be fasting, at the end of the day I'm going to have my 3 meals in one shot. And then I'll do that the next day. Or as some of these practitioners of fasting do nowadays, they turn their nights into days and their days into nights. They'll fast during the daytime, but they're sleeping. I mean, that's running away from your responsibility. This is unheard of. I can't go back to any book in history, any reference book that would tell you the Muslims, when they began fasting, whether it was in the first generation of Islam or whether it was in the 10th generation of Islam, were fasting in such a manner. But nowadays, you have people who have absconded. They've totally left this responsibility of fasting with its social meanings, its social dynamics. Fasting to them doesn't mean eliminating hunger. I would think during the month of Ramadan, Muslims, if they had a sense of their social character in Ramadan, they would be out there. This is the least that can be done. It should be much more than this. But the least that can be done is they would have soup kitchens around. And they would go out there, wherever there is hunger and poverty, they would extinguish it, at least at their local level. That would be something, a contribution to the meaning of fasting. as it was intended in the Quran and the Sunnah. But they've abandoned ship, the Muslims who are selfishly fasting. We have a selfish fast in which a person is satisfied. Hey, wait a minute, I've done my fasting here. I didn't eat, I didn't drink during the daytime, and here I am gobbling up all of this, or all these morsels at the end of the day, and I've done my duty. No, you've not done any of your duty. This type of fasting, just like there's a hadith, رُبَّ قَارِئٍ الْقُرْآنِ وَالْقُرْآنُ يَلْعَنُهُ. You may have a person who is reciting the Quran and the Quran is condemning him. By the same analogy, you may have a person who is fasting and his fasting is condemning him because he failed to extend the meaning of this fast to roll back hunger and poverty from society. The inability to do that is just like what we call the separation of church and state. This is just like people in the course of their own history, they took away God's guidance and scripture from organizing and administering the affairs of men. On the personal level, an individual has done the same thing. He's taken away the social responsibilities or meanings of the fast that he is supposed to be practicing and is satisfied with those meanings serving his own self. And any person who just does a little thinking about the obligations of Islam, fara'id al-Islam, wajibat al-Islam, anyone who has just a little thought going into that would know that Islam is not a selfish expression of a relationship with Allah Jalla wa Ala. It is a selfless, not a selfish, a selfless relationship via these what we call rituals. They're not supposed to be like that, but they've shrunken so much that they've become just these personal routines and habits.
Yeah, even if a person was to take a look at it like that, whether they're looking at their salat like that or they're looking at fasting in that manner, whatever your personal devotion to Allah is, in order for you to even acquire self-validation for what you're doing, it has to be socially validated. It has to be tested. Your devotion has to be tested in the face of people who are saying, look, I'm not going to do what God wants me to do. And if your commitment to Allah is not strong enough to show that person that this is the better way to behave, then what value is your personal commitment? It appears that it's almost no value unless it's validated by some form of social activism.
Very good. Very well said, Hafid.
And so I think this brings us again to the end of this particular program. We'll continue on with the next few ayat about Ramadan in the coming programs. Once again, should any of you choose to go into more detail about what was presented today, please get a hold of copies of the Ascendant Quran. It's the first ever tafsir of the Quran written directly in the English language. It explains many of these details, and you'll see quite a bit more information, more depth about the discussions that we've had today. I'd like to thank our guest, Imam Muhammad al-Asi, for giving us all of this information and this critical analysis about what we should understand from Ramadan. We hope that you get enough out of this program to be very, very interested in coming back to attend the next programs that we have about Ramadan and about important Islamic issues. Again, it'll be the same time, same channel. We hope to see you back. And with that, we'll conclude this particular session of our Ramadan journey. I'm your host. My name is Afif Khan. And we'll see you back again tomorrow. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.